So in this video, we're actually going to be talking about the MBA landscape in Canada. Some of you might already live in Canada or have the intention of moving to Canada to pursue your MBA. So hopefully this video will provide some clarification, close off any knowledge gaps, and just generally give you an idea and an overview of what the MBA landscape looks like in Canada. One of the things you need to consider first is that the MBA program in general is typically marketed as a networking type of degree. The reason for this is a lot of students will devote quite a bit of time during their MBA program to networking, both with domestic recruiters and international recruiters, just to be able to secure some post MBA employment prospects. The other reason for this is that a lot of the times recruitment will be tied to the brand recognition as well as the rank of the specific school that the candidate is coming from. So for this reason, it's very important for candidates to consider where they want to work when they graduate. So do you intend on moving out of Canada when you graduate or maybe returning to your native country, or do you plan on staying in Canada when you graduate? Based off of your answer to this question, the sample of schools you're going to be looking at is probably going to be considerably different. One of the reasons for this is that people who tend or intend on moving back to their native country when they graduate will typically look at the brand name schools that rank very well overall and will specifically be recognized in the country that they intend on moving back to. So examples of this is going to be the University of Toronto, UBC, McGill. You kind of get the idea there. The reason is that if you were to separate the business school name to that specific school, the school itself is very highly ranking. So it's a little bit different from some of the other schools that might have a very high ranking business school, but the actual university itself isn't as recognized. So perhaps executives and recruiters in other countries won't necessarily recognize how prestigious that program actually is. Now, for the purposes of this video, what I did is I actually grouped together programs that have very similar attributes in order for us to break down the specific programs a lot easier. And so what I've done is I've focused on schools. We'll start off with the schools that are best targeted for people who are early career or perhaps right out of their undergraduate program. Two that really do stand out is McMaster's DeGroote School of Business as well as the University of Laurier. The reason for this is that both of these programs, they're actually structured very similarly, but they have integrated co-op options in their MBA programs. They obviously offer a full-time program as well too. I believe they have part-time options. But one of the things that make them stand out, make them different from a lot of the other programs, is that integrated co-op experience. This is very awesome for people coming from maybe a science background or an engineering background. They're not entirely sure about what field they want to focus on. And so getting the opportunity to do an academic term followed by a work term, followed by another academic term, and then a work term, and then kind of continues for the full MBA process, it'll kind of give them a general understanding of the different areas of the business that they might be interested in. They can even test trial it for 4 months, maybe determine at the end of that that it's really not for them, and still have enough time in their program to really focus on a different area of the business without actually committing to something very early on and then having to kind of deal with it when they graduate and they determine that that's not the field for them. Another notable mention is also going to be Dalhousie University, which has a corporate residency program. It's structured a little bit differently, and it is an East Coast school. And so that's also something to consider. A lot of the times, people who intend on working in Toronto, particularly in Ontario, will look at DeGroote as well as Laurier just because of the fact that they both have campuses in the greater Toronto area. And so, for the purposes of recruitment, if you intend on staying within that area, that's probably the most ideal option for you. I know that Dalhousie has placed people in the greater Toronto area also, so maybe not don't leave that option out. It's something else to consider. But if you want a general idea of what it's going to be like to work and live in the GTA, it's probably best for you to look at specifically at Laurier and DeGroote first. The other thing is in terms of rankings, both schools rank very similarly. Both schools have a very strong brand reputation within Canada, and so if you're worried about how those degrees are going to be perceived by recruiters and employers in Canada, nothing that you should really be too concerned about there. Also, the other great thing about those specific degrees is because of the co-op experiences and because the degrees themselves tend to be um, fairly fair priced as compared to some of maybe the US counterparts, it can help offset some of the costs just by the fact that you have a lot of the internship opportunities, a lot more than you would in a traditional MBA program. And so this is specifically good for people coming out of their undergraduate program or maybe early career. They don't have a lot of money to be devoting to an MBA program. This is a really awesome option for you to consider. The next one is we're going to focus, the next group of schools we're going to focus on are the brand name schools. So ones that you're going to recognize. I touched upon them briefly earlier, but this is the University of Toronto, UBC Sauder School of Business, McGill's Desault School of Business. I don't think I pronounced that right. Another one that I didn't mention is York University Schulich School of Business. Now, the reason why these ones stand out, Schulich not so much, but the other three in particular is because the schools themselves tend to rank extremely well in general. If you were to leave out the business school and just look at the overall school ranking, they tend to perform very well. So it does have that international brand recognition. The business school also ranks very well, also in all three of those options. They also are located in hub cities, right in the heart of hub cities. And so if you plan on moving to Toronto, for example, University of Toronto is right in the downtown core. Similar with McGill for Montreal and UBC for people looking to move out west. So that's also something else to consider. The other thing as well too is these programs are typically a 2-year program. So you'll have two academic terms followed by an internship, followed by the two academic terms. This is great for people who are career switchers, who have quite a bit of experience in a specific field, but they want to make a complete 180 switch to something entirely different. This is very, very valuable for them to have. It'll give you a good understanding of the fundamentals of business, particularly if you don't have a business background, followed by that internship, which is going to be extremely important for postgraduate employment prospects. The other thing to consider, this makes it a little bit different than some of the other schools I'm going to compare it to after, but the class sizes tend to be a little bit higher for some of these programs. So I know that the University of Toronto typically will accept a lot more students than maybe some of the smaller regional schools. This is similar for all the schools that I'm mentioning right now. The reason for this, honestly, is I believe it's just because of the nature of the amount of applicants that they actually get in, but also they can accommodate for a lot more students just by virtue of being a larger school, being where it's located as well too. It's just it comes with the territory. But I also don't think it's a bad thing in a lot of ways. I mean, some people will look at it in terms of, okay, the networking opportunities and just on-campus recruiting is going to be a lot more difficult with a bigger pool of candidates vying for some of those positions. I get that aspect of it, but I also look at it in terms of if you're looking to build out your network with other people who've come from other countries, other industries, just a great way and a great opportunity for you to meet a ton of different people in a shorter period of time. So something else to consider there. These groups of schools, because they have such a strong brand name, they also do have some of the most expensive tuition fees associated with them. They're also a 2-year program, something else to consider. There's only the one internship, and so if that's something that matters to you, might be something else to consider there. But overall, these schools tend to be very high quality. They rank well. Just a great group of schools to look at. I focus specifically on people who are switching careers earlier. These are great schools to look at if you are doing so. But I want to emphasize the fact that these schools they're great for pretty much anyone across the employment spectrum. Anything outside of people who are coming right out of their undergraduate degree, I would typically recommend you have at least 2 years of experience. Unless you're doing a double degree, that might be a little bit different, but I would recommend at least 2 years of experience before looking at any of these schools. And their range typically starts at 2 years of experience, probably right up to 10. And so that they do have a very diverse class size in terms of that also. The last group of schools I'm going to focus on are going to be what I like to refer to as the hidden gems. These two schools in particular are two of my favorites, just because I think that they often go overlooked, and I think that they're very high quality. They rank fairly well. They place really well, particularly in Canada. And so these two are Ivey Business School and Queen's School of Business. Recently switched names to the Smith School of Business, same program, same rigor, same reputation. Nothing much has changed outside of the name, but these two programs are very, very, very high quality in my opinion. They're 12-month programs, so that's something that differs from some of the other programs I compared them to. But even though they are 12-month programs, they are extremely, extremely high quality. Employers tend to view them just as favorably as their counterparts, the University of Toronto, McGill, that type of thing. So the 12-month program is a little bit different in structure, but you're not going to be sacrificing anything in terms of what you're able to actually learn in that period of time. And one other thing that's important to note is they tend to place very well in bulge bracket investment banking firms as well as bulge bracket consulting firms as well too. So you're not necessarily at a disadvantage there. I will say the only thing that probably really differs from the previous group of schools that I looked at is where they're located, and that might be important for people looking to really do a lot of networking. Both of these schools are in kind of remote locations. Smith School of Business is in Kingston, which is just between Ottawa and Toronto, so a couple hours away. It's definitely a drive you can do. It's not too far removed. I know that there's a lot of trains and buses that go back and forth to that region, so it's not too far removed from there. Ivy Business School is in London, again, a couple hours away from Toronto. This doesn't deter any recruiters from coming to campus because of the nature of the program and because it ranks so well. It does attract a high amount of recruiters, and so you're not at a disadvantage there. You're also not at a disadvantage if you need to go into Toronto for any type of interviews or recruitment opportunities or networking opportunities or anything of that nature. It definitely is a commute you can do. Probably not something that you can do on a daily basis. It'll be pretty taxing, but definitely not something that is impossible. One thing I really love about these programs is that they tend to have smaller class sizes. I think this is extremely beneficial, particularly for the learning style. Like I know Ivy really focuses on the case-based approach to learning, and Smith School of Business really emphasizes the team-based approach. And I really love the fact that they can have that commitment to smaller teams and just a smaller class size in general. I think it's really important, not only for just building the connections within that specific cohort, but also just for on campus recruiting and that type of thing also. The other thing also, if you were to look at um, salary reports and employment reports for these types of schools as and compare them to the University of Toronto and the McGill's and those types of schools also, not only do they place people also in, like I mentioned, the bulge bracket firms, but they seem to place a similar or comparable, I should say, comparable number of people to these big firms, which is extremely significant because if you were to compare that with the class sizes of these schools, they're actually placing a higher percentage of their class sizes to these high ranking firms. So, something else to consider. I've also seen quite a bit of people from these schools uh, being able to get employment in the United States, in New York, and California, other hub cities in the United States, hub states also. Um, and so don't be deterred by the fact that they're in Canada, the 1 year program. The only thing that I would caution you if you are an international student and you're coming to some of these programs is the nature of the fact that it is a 12-month program. I'm not in any way an expert on visas or what requirements you're going to need in terms of education in order to secure employment and how long you're able to stay when you graduate. But one thing that you definitely need to consider is whether or not it's going to have any impact at all on your visa. So that's probably the biggest concern there. Again, depending on the country you're coming from, you're going to want to determine what the alumni groups is like in that specific country that you plan on returning back to, as well as what the brand of the school generally is and how well that's received amongst employers and recruiters back in the country that you intend on going to. Now, aside from these clusters of schools, one thing I specifically avoided because I think this should be a video on its own is the accelerated MBA option. This is obviously great for people, and it's actually targeted for people who have undergraduate degrees in business, already have the fundamentals down. You can kind of just bypass those and specialize on the specific degree. I think that people who are applying to the accelerated option is a completely different profile from people who are applying to the actual traditional option. So I'm not going to group it together in this video. That's going to be coming in the future. The other type of program I didn't focus on is the executive MBA. And this is something for people who are later on in their MBA or later on in their career, and they don't necessarily need a lot of the same features that are present in a lot of the MBAs that we covered right now. Again, this is going to have a video of its own, but one thing I want to mention is I'm a huge fan of a lot of the executive MBA programs in Canada. I think they have quite a few hidden gems in there. My favorite and probably the most notable is the Queen's Cornell Partnership. I think it's a fantastic program. I'm not affiliated with it in any way, obviously, but I just think it's really awesome because I love the remote nature of it. I love the fact that people don't have to leave their jobs, don't have to leave necessarily where they live. There are some type of requirements for you to sort of meet up with the cohort as well, and that's a couple times throughout the program. I think that that's very beneficial as well, but I like the fact that you don't necessarily have to, commute quite regularly to some of these programs. So I like that one. I know that the Schoolage School of Business has a partnership with Kellogg, which is also really awesome for you to benefit from their faculty, their expertise, and that type of thing also. So quite a few awesome options for you to consider depending on what suits your needs. And so again, this will probably be a separate video, and this focuses specifically on people who are probably 7, 8 or 9 years of experience or more, don't necessarily want to change their career, don't necessarily want to leave the company they're at, but specifically are looking to take their career to the next step and are essentially looking for other things other than just learning about the fundamentals of business. They're at a completely different stage to where they're probably looking at more advanced level management types of topics. The last group of schools I didn't really touch on are the smaller regional schools. These are very important for people who are domestic students, even international students as well too. They rank very well in Canada. I don't know how well they'll transfer into overall markets and if you plan on moving overseas, but if you're looking for a high quality education for a very reasonable price, there are definitely a lot of public options in Canada that will provide you with that and have a lot of great recruitment domestically. And so those are also other options to consider as well. I wanted to focus more so on the brand name ones and the ones that will attract a lot of the international students so that they kind of have an idea of what the landscape looks like here and which one will suit their needs. So that's it for this video. I hope I gave you a general understanding of what the business school landscape looks like in Canada. I urge you to continue on with your research process. If you have any other questions or relating to this video, anything you think I can help out with, I'm by no means an expert, but I'll do my best to help out. So make sure you leave it in the comment section below. I'll do my best to answer. And as always, make sure to stay tuned for the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.